The second season of the widely hated Amazon series Rings of Power just dropped, so the heated discussion surrounding the project has recently risen in intensity, and though I've already expressed my feelings about the show, that was before the first season had even dropped. So I feel the need to try and articulate those feelings again in a way that may help some who might actually enjoy this show better understand where those feelings come from. But if you're new to the channel, I'm just thinking out loud here, so if you like my brain vomit, you know where the like and subscribe buttons are. Before I explain why this show is so furiously hated, I want to address all those watching who I consider my allies in the fight for Tolkien's legacy. We will not win any fights worth fighting with hate and hurtful words. No one deserves to be treated with spite and scorn for enjoying something you despise. My hatred, if that's even the right word, is focused on this work of desecration itself and the greed that motivates it, not the individuals involved in it or enjoying it. It's not worth causing hurt and injury over this topic, as passionate as you are, and we're not winning any battles worth fighting by harassing and abusing others who don't understand what this fight is about. That said, in my experience, most of the show's defenders who I've engaged with don't actually want to think about it and have an intelligent discussion, as much as they just want to seek out those dismantling it to accuse them of being mindless haters and bigots in order to justify their enjoyment of what is being called out as crap. So on both sides, we can do better. And those joining me in the comments, I'm only going to engage with those who have valid points worth acknowledging. So if you disagree, don't waste your time typing if you just want to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. Now with that prelude out of the way, let me attempt to civilly explain my strong and very thought-through opinions on the Rings of Power to those who see our criticism merely as unearned, mindless hatred. First of all, before I even explain my feelings as a lover of the work Professor Tolkien breathed into life, I must address this show as a piece of media on its own merits. I won't say much here, as much as there is to say, because so much has already been said, and this area of criticism is not the cause of my emotional response to the series. Not to mention I'm not the best equipped person to criticize it, as I refuse to watch it myself. I only experience it vicariously through those willing to suffer through it so we don't have to. I will simply say that, as someone who appreciates thoughtful, artistic, and powerful entertainment, who loves quality storytelling, and who can't help but think thoroughly about everything I watch and read, the very reason I love Tolkien's writing so much, I find it extremely difficult to understand how anyone can possibly find the show enjoyable. The writing, from the dialogue to the character development and the plots, is simply amateurish on every level, and it's absurd that Amazon spent $1 billion on the project, and this was the best they could put into the story. It's painfully clear the studio thought the name alone would carry it to success, and didn't spend the time and effort to make it actually worth watching. After all, the whole thing is basically just a subversion of Professor Tolkien's legacy into an advertisement for Amazon Prime, so telling a good story was the last thing on the company's mind when they hired the writers. But I'm getting ahead of myself. However I may feel about the quality of the show, that is but my personal taste, and I can't fault those who enjoy media I do not, who don't require their entertainment to have any degree of logical consistency or be led by compelling characters, who don't take time to think about what they see on the screen for even a second or expect the artists to truly pour their hearts and souls into their creation. If you can simply turn off your brain and enjoy whatever you watch as long as it checks whatever boxes you had going in, then as much as I may want to have a whole conversation with you to persuade you to raise your standards for entertainment, better spend your time, and actually use your God-given brain, I ultimately must respect your tastes and choices in entertainment, and I won't go out of my way to bash on you personally for it. However, this show is not just any product of poor writing, direction, and production quality. The world of entertainment is packed full of thousands of subpar studio projects led by executives who threw money at it with the expectation of it making money back based on the name alone, in spite of a lack of any real talent or passion behind or in front of the camera. And you won't hear anyone throwing a fit about the vast majority of them. Most you've forgotten existed if you ever even heard of them in the first place. If it weren't for the iconic name slapped on the front of this lifeless project, it would just be another generic, forgettable fantasy show lost in the slough that no one would care about, and I wouldn't care if people loved it because I probably wouldn't know it existed. And that's the problem. Amazon just made a generic, forgettable fantasy show with no real heart or talent behind or in front of the camera, and spent all their money buying a fan base by slapping the name of the most recognizable IP they could get their hands on into the title and sprinkling in a handful of names Tolkien came up with to justify calling it an adaptation. The suits at Amazon just wanted to milk the fan base of a beloved franchise for money, and telling a good story was an afterthought. For contrast, Peter Jackson and everyone involved in the Lord of the Rings trilogy loved the work they were adapting, and fought tooth and nail to be able to make the films Tolkien deserved, pouring their hearts and souls, their blood, sweat, and tears into the project. As Pete famously said, they had no interest in telling their own story or putting their messages into the movies, but only wanted to tell Tolkien's story and bring his work to the screen. Meanwhile, the showrunners to this are constantly saying things like how they are telling the story Tolkien never wrote, or how they are trying to earn their imitation a spot on the shelf beside the original, or how they need to adjust Tolkien's world to reflect the modern world, and on and on and on. They think they can write something at least as good as he did, and are clearly less interested in preserving his legacy, as they are in putting their own stamp on it, and updating it for the times. Let me stop myself there before my rant defeats my intended purpose. Yet at this point, you may still be wondering why this matters, why it's worth getting so upset about, and in response to that, let me make my ultimate point. Look for a second at Star Wars. Until recently, the release of a new Star Wars film in every era was a huge deal. To be cast in the franchise would make your career. It was one of the most reliably profitable brands in Hollywood, and, though the prequels were controversial, as a whole, it was basically universally beloved. That was when it was the passion project, the brainchild, of George Lucas, before Disney got their hands on it. I don't think I need to spend much time comparing the glory days of the original trilogy to the dark abyss of The Acolyte, just the most recent and dramatic example among the countless similar projects pumped out onto Disney Plus over the last few years, to make my point. And if you enjoy shows such as The Acolyte on Disney Plus, that's not my point. But there's a clear difference in what Star Wars used to be and what it's become. That's what happens when creative freedom, genuine talent and love, and dedication to the original material are sacrificed for a quick buck. Why are the fans of Tolkien so passionate in their criticism of the Rings of Power? Because as great as Star Wars is, the professor's work is something far more special. If it seems some revere his writings almost like scripture, that's because this man devoted his life to crafting something with a scope, a depth, a beauty and grandeur with no peer in fiction, almost becoming comparable to scripture. Educated men and women literally devote careers to studying the product of his imagination. There is something that feels almost sacred to what he created, and the love he had for it was palpable. And the original film trilogy is loved so much because it captures that pretty darn well, if not necessarily perfectly. What we who love this man's life and legacy fear is that we are seeing in The Rings of Power the degeneration of that legacy into just another overused IP, milked to death by studio executives willing to squeeze every last cent from it till no one cares about it anymore. And we won't stand for it. Thanks for watching. If you didn't already hate this show, I hope you were willing to hear me out, because I'm afraid those who genuinely enjoy this show get attacked for it to the point that they don't hear or understand the valid criticism and just see manic, irrational hatred. I hope it helps someone appreciate why we, the fans, care so much about it, and I hope it possibly inspires some to express their feelings and opinions more civilly and respectfully to those who don't share them. If you want to hear more of my thoughts, check out my older video on all the reasons I already hated the show before its release. Thank you, and whether you hate or enjoy the show, I hope you have a great time either watching or avoiding it like the plague. I hope to see you next time, and until then, never stay silent.